Today's video is sponsored by Squarespace. Welcome back to Instagram versus reality, the segment on the channel where we call out bad Photoshop practices and impossible beauty standards with science or basic common sense. As always, these videos are intended to be informative and are not aimed to target or slander anyone's brand. This week's submissions are from r/Instagram reality. Alright, so let's jump into our first example, which is yet another professional quote-unquote photoshoot, and you can see that by looking at the attire, the background, the lighting. At first, it might look like she has a double jointed elbow, but if you look closely into the reflection, the arm is actually quite straight. So clearly they've used the liquify tool to bring her waist in. This is another one of those gratuitous edits that are really not required because you don't see the shape of her body in that pose anyway, as her arm is covering most of it, so there's no need to slim your waist down or bring your hips out, because even if you did have a thinner waist or a wider hip, you really wouldn't be able to see it in that particular pose. To fix it, we're going to use the same old liquify tool to bring her arm back to its normal position, and as we compare the before and after, we can see a subtle difference that small change has made. Moving on, we have another one of those textureless, no variation in the skin type of edits, basically the ones where your face just looks like it's lost all sense of color and highlights and shadows, and you look like a flat one-dimensional object. And you might argue that it's just an example of good makeup. Well, first of all, makeup doesn't do that, if that's not apparent already. It also doesn't hide your features, as such you can see in this picture, where even though she has a lot of makeup on, you can still see the skin texture, the shadows, the highlights, and these are the factors that make up a realistic versus an unrealistic Photoshop edit. Her eyes also look a lot less lively and less flat in this example, whereas in this case, none of those things are present. There is a harsh vermilion layer, and this is the result of a layer mask in Photoshop. They probably masked her lips out with a small amount of feathering, and then they would likely start editing her face, flattening everything else out. This would also be a Snapchat filter because that's how you get those long curved eyelashes. It is quite hard to tell. All of this is very apparent because her face color does not match her shoulders or neck at all. So to fix this, we're going to use the same technique we've been using time and time again in the previous videos, and this is just to speed up the process and create a somewhat believable result, which is applying a sandstone texture on a gray layer, changing the blending mode to overlay and removing it from the parts we don't need. To go a little bit further and to add a bit more variation, we're going to paint some freckles on her face, blur the layer a little bit and drop the opacity down. Then finally, to introduce a little bit more color variation, we're going to paint some colors on a new layer and change the blending mode to soft light or color, bring the opacity down, and the final result, hopefully, looks better than the original. If we want, we could also take it one additional step further by taking the texture from our example image and applying it onto this one. So we copy it from the cheek in our example and paste it onto this picture and use a hue saturation layer to match the color and the hue as the name would imply. You can see that the skin looks much more realistic than before, and that's because it has much more pronounced highlights on her cheek and nose. And this makes a big difference compared to what a filter would do, which is flatten out all of these colors and highlights, which results in the picture appearing to look flat. Flat here means that by looking at the picture, you can't tell if there's any additional depth to it or not. In pictures or sketches, shadows and highlights determine the depth of an object or form. Now, third example, we have, yet again, a case of that strange trend where people, for whatever reason, like to have really big heads, which is weird because there's another trend going on where people like to have smaller heads, and that's what you're going to see in our example after this. Here we're going to ignore the plastic skin because that's a bigger issue at hand, and well, a big head is much more noticeable than plastic skin, but to remedy the skin overall, we would use the same process of adding sandstone to a grey layer, masking out the parts that we don't need, or copying the texture from a different picture and trying to mimic that onto this target skin layer. The difference here is that the highlights aren't flattened out, so we actually have a lot more to work with. There are no filters applied, and it's been done manually, where they have smoothened her skin out, but kept the highlights untouched. To fix this, we're going to copy the head, use the content aware fill tool to fill the pixels behind her head, decrease the size and use a clone stamp tool to fix the irregularities, and the final result looks a bit more natural than the original, given that you ignore the lack of any skin texture whatsoever. This example is very similar to the previous one where it was done by a quote-unquote professional, since this is from a TV show where they've made Taraji Henson's head insanely larger than her body. Since the background here is kind of messy, it's going to take a lot of time to fine tune this picture, but this was another example of how many ridiculous edits actually go unchecked and get posted on social media, TV, or magazines. Moving on, the next picture is an example of the opposite trend that I was previously talking about, where people tend to shrink their heads, and we've seen this in one of our previous episodes. To fix this, we're going to do the opposite of what we did in the last example. In other words, select the head, duplicate it onto a new layer, and then increase the size until it looks somewhat believable or realistic. As you can see the difference between the befores and afters, there's not that much of a difference, but it is still a huge change and helps in making it look more natural. So in terms of realism, it's a big improvement. And here we have yet another example of the infamous liquify edit, although not necessarily a bad one, but not exactly a good one either. One can argue that this is not unrealistic at all, as it hasn't been edited, and I would likely agree with that. It's not entirely unrealistic, and it is actually more towards the realistic side, but the problem here are two things. One is that the reflection in the glass behind her, and you can see this, it's not as curved as she would have us believe, and the second is that her body is perfectly curved, which is indicative of the liquify tool, because humans just tend to be perfectionists when editing themselves for whatever reasons. I guess we just like the order and symmetry, but realistically, our bodies aren't perfectly symmetrical, they're not perfectly straight, and no line is perfectly curvilinear. Now, you can have such a smoothly curved figure if you're wearing a corset, but since she's wearing a very tight dress and you don't see many outlines of the seams, it's safe to assume that she doesn't have one on. To fix this, we're again going to use the liquify tool to match her body with that of the reflection, and as is the case with these edits, the before and after are not always that big of a difference, but it does raise the question why she felt the need to edit the picture in the first place. One interesting tidbit on this entire desire to achieve a skinny body ideal from Dr. Anne Cheney, a PhD scholar in anthropology, goes, not all ethnic minority women rejected or resisted the slender body image. She suggests that some women desired the slender body ideal because they viewed it as a vehicle for increased social acceptance and mobility. For many of these women trying to fit into American society, the slender body had currency. Women who felt alienated from their peer groups, communities, and American society as a whole more generally talked about how being skinny offered them an improved sense of belonging. So this is from Most Girls Want to Be Skinny, Body Dissatisfaction Among Ethnically Diverse Women, which is a very interesting study that helps to explain the why, not necessarily the how, of what we're seeing in some of these episodes. Moving on, we have a Adobe Gaines Gremlin making a return after some time. Since this picture is too destroyed to attempt any fixes, and any fixes that we would make are going to make it look even more weird, we're going to focus on the signs. His jaw, biceps, shoulders, the liquidy door, is that even a word? The rubbery walls and so on are all very telling signs of a badly done liquefied job, and at this point, I don't think there's anybody that would believe this is real for even a second. It's one of those examples where everybody knows what they've done, yet they still post it, and some people actually would believe it. Imagine you have a sample of 200 people. If even 10% believe that this is somehow real and it goes viral on the internet, then there's a large enough population for me to make a video on this. In this next example, we have a baggy sweater, which I just love how they just curve to the contour of your body. It's almost as if the body has its own gravitational field, which it does, but it's like the same as that of a black hole. It's amazing how these influences can bend space and time. I really need to get some tips off them, become a Sith Lord, who knows. Judging by the setting, the lighting, this is another professional edit, very poorly done, I would say. Maybe a showcase for the boots or the sweater itself, an e-commerce shoot. Another thing that stands out is the background, which is undisturbed, meaning that they've had a pretty good selection of the subject so that they could work on the subject without affecting the background. Or they've used a clean plate of a background, a blank canvas. In other words, what I'm trying to get at is that they've put some thought before they were taking the photo on how they would actually edit the model after they've taken it in post-production, which is usually not a good sign if you're the model. It just says that you're not good enough for whatever product they're selling. I think it's very poor taste. A clean plate in this example would be a picture or a video taken from the same spot with the same lighting without your subject standing in it. That way I can cut out the subject, make any changes I want to it, put it back into the image as a whole, a composite, and then have the background and the foreground interact nicely with each other, perhaps by drawing in some shadows around the subject, or perhaps some light bouncing off the objects in the background onto her face, and this would be enough to convince the average viewer that this image was taken as a whole, no post-production done here at all. No foul play whatsoever. To fix this, we're going to use, as you may have guessed, the liquify tool. Since we are moving the pixels to an extreme end, and we are distorting them very heavily, we're going to get what are known as characteristic blur zones. We always talk about this on the channel, and this is essentially the computer not knowing where to put the pixels or trying to fill in the blanks as we're trying to move pixels away from areas that previously had pixels, which leads to the program having to guess what should go there instead, some other similarly colored pixel. There are some remedies against blur zones and artifacts forming in your editing, but that's a lot of work and we're not going to show that here. It does look better than before because of how a baggy sweater should look like, just basic physics. It should not contour to your body because it's a baggy sweater by definition. It should hang loose. And it does look a lot more natural now, but the editor still decided to edit that one little thing and make it so much worse. A big tell, don't over edit your images. For our lucky last example, the difference is kind of subtle, but at the same time, not that subtle because by looking at it, or at this size or zoomed out, everything does look okay. But as soon as you zoom in, you can see that the net behind her has been clone stamped over and over again for whatever reason. Half her elbow and half her hip has also been clone stamped, so it undoubtedly has been photoshopped, but you likely wouldn't have noticed that unless you had zoomed in. To fix this, we're going to use the clone stamp tool to copy parts of her elbow, and we're going to copy her shorts from the other side and paste it here, and then match the lighting by using a levels adjustment layer, and as soon as you zoom out you can see how much of a difference that makes. These are the pictures that make you question all the other pictures that you've seen on the internet of having a fit body, or basically just about anything, because as we know now, people not only Photoshop their bodies but their dresses and their faces. In one of the earlier episodes there was somebody who photoshopped her baby as well, because you can't have your baby not looking on fleek, that would be an insult to you. Alright, so that brings this episode to a close. Hopefully you've learned something about Photoshop and the techniques. We've covered everything here in a previous video, so you can watch those to learn more about how these techniques actually work. I don't want to keep repeating myself because it does get very boring talking about the liquify tool every single time. As always, if you're enjoying the content, then you can support the channel by subscribing and stay 30 more seconds to hear about the sponsor of today's video, Squarespace. Squarespace gives you a powerful and beautiful online platform from which to create your own website. If you're a content creator, this is obviously very helpful as they can take care of the back end of e-commerce. Say if you're an artist and you're trying to sell your own artwork, you can also use Squarespace to create gated members only content, manage your own members, or send email communication and leverage those audience insights to create a very sophisticated e-commerce brand all in the one platform. You can also create a community on Squarespace with a fully integrated commenting system that can support threaded comments, replies, and likes, or you can use Squarespace extensions to bring in third-party apps that can do just about whatever it is you want your website to do. Go to squarespace.com for a free trial, and when you're ready to launch, go to squarespace/CoolStudio to save 10% on your first purchase of a website or a domain.